Victoria Blackstone adjusted her glasses for the 10th time that morning and took a deep breath before entering the imposing Cross Industries building in the financial heart of New York City. The mirrored glass towers reflected the rising sun, creating a golden glow that contrasted with the morning rush on Wall Street. At 24, she knew every hallway, every elevator, and every employee of that $22 billion empire like the back of her hand. Adrian Cross, CEO of an investment empire, faces a devastating crisis. He must marry within 6 weeks to avoid losing control of the company to his corrupt cousin. Desperate and distrusting everyone in his social circle, he turns to Victoria Blackstone, his efficient and seemingly invisible secretary. Adrian calls her into a meeting and makes a surreal proposal, a contract marriage for 2 years in exchange for $5 million, with separate lives and automatic divorce. Victoria, shocked, accepts, thinking of her family's financial security. But before we reveal what happens, if you also get emotional with stories like these, click to subscribe now and help us bring more tales of courage and loyalty. Thank you. And now, let's see what happened. It was 6:30 a.m. and Victoria always arrived before everyone else. Not out of obligation, but out of necessity. The sooner she started, the sooner she'd finish, and the more time she'd have to care for her mother at home. Her low, discreet heels echoed on the marble lobby floor as she greeted the security guards, who knew her by name. Robert, the senior guard, always asked about Mrs. Helena, her mother. This simple kindness warmed Victoria's heart on mornings like this one, when the weight of responsibilities felt heavier than usual. The 32nd floor housed the executive offices, and Victoria settled at her desk with the precision of a ballerina executing a perfectly rehearsed routine. Strong coffee for Mr. Cross, exact temperature, reports organized by priority, schedule checked and reconfirmed. In 2 hours, when Adrian Cross arrived, everything would be perfectly aligned, as it had been for the past 2 years. Victoria didn't complain about the 12-hour days. In fact, she found a certain comfort in the predictability of the work, especially when her personal life was a constant juggling act of medical bills, expensive medications, and the needs of Eduardo, her 16-year-old brother. Mrs. Helena had developed a serious heart condition the previous year, and the treatment costs consumed almost all of Victoria's salary. Still, she had never asked for a raise or complained about the workload. She had grown up learning that honest work was a blessing, not a burden. At 8:30 a.m. sharp, Adrian Cross emerged from the private elevator like a controlled storm. Tall, broad-shouldered, and always impeccably dressed, he walked with the confidence of someone born to command. At 31, he had transformed the family company into one of the largest investment holdings in the country. Victoria discreetly watched him pass her desk without a greeting, as usual. To him, she was part of the efficient office furniture. "Victoria, I need the quarterly reports in an hour," he said, without looking up from the papers he was carrying. "And cancel my lunch with the Petersons. Reschedule for next week." "Already done, Mr. Cross," she replied in her calm, professional voice. "The reports have been on your desk since 7 o'clock, organized by division, and Mr. Peterson called yesterday confirming he'd prefer to reschedule anyway." Adrian paused for a moment, surprised by her anticipation, but soon disappeared into his office without comment. Victoria smiled inwardly, anticipating his needs had become an art she mastered with expertise. The phone rang incessantly throughout the morning. Nervous investors, emergency meetings, decisions that moved millions. Victoria filtered calls, organized priorities, and kept the machine running with the silent efficiency that had made her indispensable. Between calls, she discreetly checked messages from Eduardo. He had passed another math test and sent a celebratory emoji that made Victoria smile for the first time that day. During her lunch break, which she always took at her desk to save money, Victoria called home. Mrs. Helena's frail voice on the other end of the line made her heart clench. "Honey, the doctor called earlier today. He wants to reschedule the tests for next week," said Mrs. Helena, trying to sound cheerful. "He said it's not urgent, that it can wait." Victoria knew her mother too well not to notice the white lie. The tests were expensive, and Mrs. Helena was trying to spare her another expense. She bit her lower lip, mentally calculating the month's bills. Maybe she could get an advance on her bonus, or maybe she could ask for some overtime. "Mom, don't worry about it. I'll take care of it," Victoria said, injecting confidence into her voice. "Did Eduardo get home from school?" "He just got here. Does he want to talk to you?" "Just tell him I'm proud of him for the math test. I'll be home around 9, as always." She hung up the phone and returned to work with renewed determination. There was no time for self-pity. Mrs. Helena and Eduardo depended on her, and she wouldn't let them down, ever. The afternoon brought an unexpected crisis when one of the company's largest clients threatened to withdraw their investments. Victoria watched Adrian work for hours, making calls, negotiating, using all his skill to navigate the situation. She remained in the office until 10 o'clock at night, providing documents, organizing video conferences, and ensuring he had everything he needed. When she finally left the building, New York City shone with its nightlights. The subway was almost empty, and Victoria took advantage of the 40-minute ride to her apartment in Queens to close her eyes and rest. In her small but cozy apartment, she was expected. Mrs. Helena was already asleep but had left a plate of food warming in the oven. Eduardo studied at the kitchen table, surrounded by books. "How was your day, Vic?" he asked, using the affectionate nickname from when they were kids. "Long but productive," she replied, tousling her brother's hair. "And you? Besides the math? A test that made me proud?" "There's something I wanted to tell you," Eduardo said, suddenly serious. "The chemistry teacher said that I have the potential to get a full scholarship to a good university, but I would have to dedicate myself more to studying and take a preparatory course." Victoria felt her heart tighten with pride and worry at the same time. Eduardo was brilliant. He deserved every opportunity in the world, but prep courses were expensive and she could barely keep up with the bills. "Let's talk about it on the weekend," she said, smiling. "For now, keep up the good work. I'm very proud of you." That night, before going to sleep, Victoria looked out the window of the room she shared with her mother. The city lights stretched to the horizon, and somewhere out there were the towers of Wall Street where she worked. Two worlds so close geographically, but separated by social chasms that she knew well. She closed her eyes and made the same silent promise she made every night. Tomorrow would be better. She would find a way to pay for her mother's exams, to help Eduardo with his college dreams, to keep her family united and safe. She didn't know how, but she would find a way. She always did. At Cross Industries, the lights on the 32nd floor remained on late into the night, where Adrian Cross worked alone, unaware that his efficient and seemingly invisible secretary harbored dreams and struggles that made his own life seem small in comparison. Autumn had arrived in New York City, bringing with it an unprecedented tension in the corridors of Cross Industries. Victoria noticed the change in Adrian's behavior throughout the week. Whispered calls, last-minute cancelled meetings, and a nervousness he tried to disguise with his usual mask of absolute control. On Friday, when the clock struck 7 in the evening and the office was almost empty, Adrian did something he had never done before. He asked Victoria to stay. "I need to resolve a critical situation this weekend," he said, running a hand through his dark hair agitatedly. "Urgent documents will be arriving that need to be organized immediately." Victoria nodded without hesitation, even knowing that it would mean arriving home even later. She called Eduardo to tell him that she wouldn't be able to have dinner with them, as she had promised. The disappointment in her brother's voice made her swallow a sigh, but work was work. Saturday dawned grey, matching the somber mood that hung over the almost deserted building. Victoria arrived at 8 in the morning and found Adrian already in his office, with his tie loosened and dark circles under his eyes. Documents scattered across the desk revealed frightening numbers and plummeting graphs. Throughout the day, she organized papers, answered urgent calls, and provided coffee after coffee, watching him work with increasing desperation. It was during Saturday night, when the city lights began to flicker below, that everything changed. Victoria was organizing the last reports when she heard a strange noise coming from Adrian's office. A muffled sound, almost inaudible, that made her stop what she was doing. She hesitated for a moment, then knocked lightly on the ajar door. "Mr. Cross, is everything all right?" Silence. Then a hoarse voice. "Come in." What Victoria saw made her completely forget about professional protocols. Adrian Cross, the man who had always seemed indestructible, was sitting on the floor behind his desk, his back against the wall, his face hidden in his hands. The papers scattered around him told a story of impending disaster. "Mr. Cross?" she said softly, approaching carefully. He looked up, and Victoria saw something she had never imagined seeing: pure vulnerability. There were no more masks, no more the powerful CEO, just a 31-year-old man facing the possibility of losing everything. "My grandfather's going to take the company from me," Adrian said, his voice filled with a bitterness that cut Victoria's heart. 60 years building this empire, and he's going to hand it over to my cousin James because I'm not stable enough. Victoria crouched down beside him, completely forgetting the hierarchy that had always kept them apart. "What happened?" "I need to be married by my birthday in 6 weeks, or I lose control of the company." Adrian laughed bitterly. "My grandfather decided that a single 32-year-old CEO is too irresponsible to run Cross Industries, that I need maturity and family stability." The words came out in a torrent, as if a dam had broken. Adrian told her about the family pressure, about his grandfather's ultimatum, about the disastrous relationship that had ended the previous month when he discovered that his girlfriend was trying to blackmail his family. Victoria listened in silence, feeling the weight of the unexpected trust he placed in her. "I've thought about hiring someone, an actress maybe," Adrian continued, "but I can't trust a stranger with information that could destroy the company. And no woman in my social circle would agree to an arranged marriage in 6 weeks. Victoria felt her heart racing. For the first time in 2 years, Adrian was seeing her as a real person, not just as an efficient extension of his office. He was sharing with her his deepest fears, his most guarded vulnerabilities. "You know all my secrets," he said suddenly, looking directly at her. "You know my routine, my habits, my quirks. You know how I react in crises, how I think, how I work." The air grew thick between them. Victoria felt something changing, an electric current running through the space that separated them. "You're the only person I can completely trust," Adrian continued, his voice gaining increasing urgency. "The only one who has never betrayed me, never disappointed me, never judged me." Victoria opened her mouth to respond, but couldn't make a sound. What he was suggesting was impossible, absurd, unthinkable. "I know it's crazy," Adrian said, getting up abruptly and starting to pace back and forth. "I know you have your life, your family, but Victoria..." He stopped in front of her, his blue eyes burning with intensity. "What if I could solve your financial problems forever? What if I could guarantee that your mother has the best medical treatment available, that your brother has access to the best education in the country?" Victoria's heart pounded. He knew about her situation at home. How? "I see more than you think," Adrian said, as if reading her thoughts. "I see you working 12 hours a day without complaining. I see you checking your cell phone with concern when you think no one is looking. I see you eating sandwiches at your desk to save money." Victoria felt her cheeks burn with shame and indignation. "Are you spying on me?" "I care," he replied, surprising them both with the sincerity of the statement. "Even though I'm a terrible boss who barely looks at you, I care. And now I'm offering a solution that could save us both." The silence that followed was charged with possibilities and impossibilities. Victoria looked at the papers scattered on the floor, then at the man she knew only as her boss, but who was now showing himself to be completely human for the first time. "What exactly are you proposing?" she asked, her voice coming out weaker than she intended. Adrian took a deep breath, like a man about to jump off a cliff. "Marriage," he said, "by contract, for 2 years, $5 million for you, plus all your mother's medical expenses and your brother's education covered. You continue to be my secretary with a substantial salary increase, minimal public appearances as a wife, completely separate lives at home, and automatic divorce when it's all over." Victoria felt the world spin around her. $5 million, her mother's, treatment guaranteed, Eduardo's college secured, financial security for the rest of her life. "Are you serious?" she whispered. "Completely serious," Adrian replied. "You would save my company, Victoria, and I would save your family." Outside, New York City continued pulsing on Saturday night, oblivious to the moment that would forever change the lives of 2 people on the 32nd floor of Cross Industries. No, Victoria spent the entire Sunday walking the streets of Queens, Adrian's proposal echoing in her mind like a broken record. $5 million. The word seemed unreal, almost science fiction for someone who calculated pennies to make the money last until the end of the month. She observed the simple houses in the neighborhood, the children playing in the street, the families gathered in small yards, and wondered if she was crazy for even considering the idea. Mrs. Helena noticed her agitation during lunch. "Honey, you've barely touched your food. Did something happen at work?" Victoria almost choked on her water. If only her mother knew what kind of work had been offered to her. "I'm just tired, Mom. Busy week." Eduardo, always more observant than he seemed, studied her with curiosity. "Vic, you've been acting strange since yesterday. Are you sure everything is okay?" "I'm fine, Eduardo. Stop worrying about me and focus on your studies." But she wasn't fine. The night was long and sleepless, filled with impossible calculations and scenarios that ranged from the absurd to the miraculous. Fake marriage with her boss. The idea was so bizarre that it was almost comical if it weren't for the seriousness of the numbers involved. On Monday, Victoria arrived at the office an hour earlier than usual, if that was possible. She needed to process everything before facing Adrian. But when he emerged from the elevator at 8:30, as always, she realized that he had also spent a difficult night. There was something different in his eyes when they crossed for a brief moment. "Good morning, Victoria," he said, stopping for the first time in front of her desk. "Good morning, Mr. Cross," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "Have you thought about our conversation?" Victoria felt her heart race. There he was, the powerful Adrian Cross, anxiously awaiting her answer as if she held all the power in the world in her hands. "I have," she said simply. "And?" Victoria took a deep breath. "I need to know more details. How would it work exactly? What would the rules be? The expectations?" A visible relief passed over Adrian's face. She hadn't said no. "Can we talk tonight, after work?" Victoria agreed, and the day passed in a strange fog of artificial normalcy. They answered calls, organized meetings, dealt with minor crises, but both were clearly with their minds elsewhere. The employees began to notice the unprecedented tension between them. "Victoria is quieter than usual," commented Mark from the finance department during coffee break. "And Cross seems nervous. I wonder if there are layoffs coming." If they knew the truth, Victoria thought with bitter irony, At 7 in the evening, when the office emptied, Adrian called her to his office. He had prepared a complete presentation, as if he were selling a business project. In a sense, it was exactly that. 2-year contract, he began, opening a thick folder. Simple civil marriage, only witnesses needed. You keep your job as executive secretary, but with a salary tripled immediately. Victoria swallowed hard. Tripled salary meant being able to help other families besides her own. Residence at my house in Greenwich, but in separate rooms. Minimal public appearances, only essential events where we need to appear as a couple. The rest of the time, completely independent lives. And the money? Victoria asked, feeling vulgar for asking the question, but knowing she needed to be practical. 5 million divided into monthly installments during the 2 years, plus a final bonus of 1 million upon divorce. All your mother's medical expenses covered by my executive health plan. Complete education for your brother guaranteed, including private university and postgraduate studies if he wants. Victoria felt tears burning her eyes. It was more generosity than she had ever dreamed possible. Why would you do this, she asked. Why not hire a professional actress? Because I need someone I completely trust, Adrian replied, his voice gaining intensity. Someone who knows my world, who knows how to react in unexpected situations. You've worked with me for 2 years, Victoria. You know my clients, my enemies, my family. A stranger could ruin everything with a wrong word at the wrong moment. It made sense, a terrible and logical sense. I need to talk to my family, Victoria said finally. Of course, but Victoria... Adrian hesitated. They can't know the truth about the contract. To everyone, including them, it will have to be a real marriage, a romance that blossomed in the workplace. The complexity of the situation hit Victoria like a punch to the stomach, lying to her mother and Eduardo about what was really happening. They'll think it's strange, very sudden. We'll say we were keeping it a secret because of company policies, that we finally decided to make the relationship official. Victoria closed her eyes, trying to imagine the conversation with Mrs. Helena. How would she explain that she was suddenly engaged to her millionaire boss? I need a night to decide, she said. Of course, but Victoria, I need an answer. By Wednesday, time is running out. That night, Victoria arrived home later than usual and found Eduardo studying at the kitchen table, as always. Mrs. Helena had left dinner warming and a sweet note wishing her good night. Vic, Eduardo called when she was serving herself food. Can I ask you a weird question? Sure. Are you in love? Victoria almost dropped her plate. What? Why? Why do you ask that? I don't know. You're different. More agitated. Like you have a secret. If Eduardo only knew how right he was. Victoria forced a smile. Don't be silly, I'm just tired. Dude, but as she prepared for bed, her brother's question echoed in her mind. In love? No. But there was something different in the way she saw Adrian since that night in the office. Seeing him vulnerable, human, real, had created a crack in the haki image of the distant boss she had maintained for 2 years. On Tuesday, Victoria woke up with crystal clear certainty. She looked at her mother, sleeping on the other side of the room, her breathing irregular because of her heart problems. She thought about Eduardo and his college dreams. She thought about the bills piling up, the expensive medications, the missed opportunities. She thought about the chance to change everything. When she arrived at the office, she found Adrian already waiting, anxiety etched on his face. I accept, she said without preamble. The relief that passed through his eyes was so intense that Victoria felt something stir in her chest. Are you sure? I am, but I want everything in writing. Every detail, every condition, every guarantee. Adrian smiled for the first time since she had known him. a genuine warm smile that completely transformed his face. "Of course, my lawyer is already preparing the documents." Victoria extended her hand formally. "Then we have an agreement, Mr. Cross." Adrian took her hand, but instead of shaking it, he brought it to his lips and placed a soft kiss on her fingers. "You can call me Adrian," he said softly. "After all, we're going to get married." The transformation began the following Thursday with the arrival of an elegant, middle-aged woman at the Cross Industries office. Eleanor Vanderbilt was an etiquette and style consultant for the New York elite, hired by Adrian to prepare Victoria properly for her new role. The mere mention of the consultant's name made Victoria feel like an imposter even before meeting her. "Darling," said Eleanor, examining Victoria from head to toe with critical eyes, "we have a lot of work ahead of us. 3 weeks isn't enough for a complete transformation, but we'll work miracles." Victoria felt her stomach clench. Complete transformation. She looked at Adrian, who was watching the assessment with a neutral expression, and for the first time, since accepting the proposal, wondered what she had gotten herself into. The first session was a disaster. Eleanor criticized everything: Victoria's posture, her way of walking, of speaking, even of holding a coffee cup. "You need to learn to be a Cross," she declared firmly. "New York society will be watching your every move." During the weekend, Adrian took Victoria to choose a suitable apartment on the Upper East Side. "It needs to look like you have financial means compatible with mine," he explained as they toured a luxurious apartment that cost more per month than Victoria earned per year. "My family will think it's strange if I move suddenly," Victoria protested, observing the stunning view of the city through the floor-to-ceiling windows. "We'll say it's a gift from me, that I don't want my fiancé living so far away," Adrian replied, signing the lease without even haggling over the price. Victoria felt a strange pang in her chest, hearing him say, "my fiancé," so naturally. The move happened on Sunday, with a team of professionals hired by Adrian transporting the few belongings of the Blackstone family to the new apartment. Mrs. Helena was radiant, although confused by the speed of events. "Honey, I still can't believe it," she said, stroking the Italian leather couch in the new living room. "Your Adrian must love you very much to do all this." Victoria forced a smile, the weight of the lie weighing on her shoulders. "He's special, Mom." Eduardo, always more perceptive, pulled her aside. "Vic, isn't this all happening too fast? You never even mentioned him before." "We were keeping it a secret, Edu. Company policies, you know how it is." But the distrust in her brother's eyes bothered her more than she expected. The second week brought full-time etiquette lessons. Eleanor was relentless, correcting every gesture, every expression, every word. Victoria learned to walk with books on her head, to talk about art and wines she had never heard of, to smile appropriately in different social situations. "You're progressing," Eleanor admitted on Thursday, "but there's still something too authentic about you. You need to be more polished, more controlled." Victoria wanted to scream that she didn't want to be polished and controlled, that she liked her authenticity, but she bit her tongue and continued practicing the perfect social smile. The real crisis began on Friday, when Adrian took her to see the mansion in the Hamptons where they would live after the wedding. The house was impressive, with extensive gardens, an Olympic-sized pool, and rooms larger than the entire old family apartment in Queens. But it was also cold, impersonal, like a soulless luxury hotel. "Your room is in this wing," Adrian said, showing a huge suite overlooking the gardens. "Mine is in the opposite wing. There are staff for everything you need." Victoria nodded, trying not to think about how alone she would feel in that immense space. The situation deteriorated the following Monday, when Adrian took her to lunch at the Metropolitan Club, where she would be formally introduced to high society. Victoria had spent hours getting ready with Eleanor's help, wearing a dress that cost more than her previous salary and shoes that hurt her feet. The lunch was a nightmare. The women in Adrian's social circle greeted her with fake smiles and seemingly innocent questions that were, in reality, investigations into her origins. Victoria tried to apply everything she had learned from Eleanor, but felt like a bad actress, playing a role she didn't master. "How interesting, darling," said a platinum-haired lady. "Adrian never mentioned you before. Where did you two meet anyway?" "At work," Victoria replied, forcing the perfect social smile. "Oh, what a romantic profession you have." The question came loaded with innuendo, and Victoria felt the blood rush to her face. These women knew exactly who she was and where she came from. They were enjoying her discomfort. "Victoria is my executive secretary," Adrian said, his voice cutting, "and one of the most competent people I know." The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria noticed the looks of pity and disdain around the table and felt herself shrinking in her chair despite all of Eleanor's preparation. After lunch, in the car, Adrian tried to minimize the embarrassment. "They're just curious. They'll get used to you." But Victoria barely managed to respond. The reality of her situation had become brutally clear. She was an intruder in a world that would never truly accept her. That night, alone in the new apartment while Mrs. Helena and Eduardo slept, Victoria looked at herself in the mirror of the luxurious bathroom. The woman staring back at her looked like a stranger. Expensive clothes, professionally styled hair, flawless makeup, but her eyes betrayed the growing despair. The phone rang. It was Adrian. "How are you feeling?" "Fine," she lied. "Victoria, I know today was difficult, but it will get easier." "Will it really?" The question came out more bitter than she intended. "Or am I going to spend the next 2 years pretending to be someone I'm not, being humiliated by people who will always know that I don't belong in their world?" Silence on the other end of the line. "Maybe we should rethink this," Victoria continued, the words coming out in a torrent. "Maybe you should find another solution, someone who already belongs in your world." "Victoria, don't..." "I can't do it, Adrian. Today I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize myself. I'm lying to my family, faking feelings I don't have, trying to be someone I'll never be. And why? For money, for your family's future, for your mother's health, for your brother's education." His words hit Victoria like a bucket of cold water. She thought of her mother's heart exams, Eduardo's college dreams, the financial security she had never had. "I know," she whispered, "but I don't know if I can keep paying this price." "What are you saying?" Victoria closed her eyes, feeling tears escape. "I'm saying that maybe I've made the biggest mistake of my life." The line was silent for a long moment. When Adrian finally spoke, his voice was filled with a vulnerability she hadn't expected. "Please, don't give up on me now. Not when we're so close." But Victoria had already hung up, letting herself sink into the king-size bed of the room that would never feel like hers, questioning if any amount of money in the world was worth the loss of her identity. Victoria didn't sleep that night. She stayed on the balcony of the new apartment, observing the lights of New York City, the weight of the decision pressing on her chest like a stone. At 5 in the morning, when the sun began to paint the sky pink, she made a resolution. She would talk to Adrian in the morning and end the agreement. She couldn't live this charade anymore. She arrived at the office earlier than usual, mentally preparing for the difficult conversation ahead. But when Adrian emerged from the elevator, she immediately realized that something was different. He seemed more dejected, more vulnerable than in recent days. "We need to talk," they both said at the same time. Adrian gestured towards his office, and Victoria followed him with a heavy heart. But before she could begin her resignation speech, he turned to her with an expression she had never seen before. "Victoria, I need to apologize. She blinked, surprised. Apologize. Last night after our call, I couldn't stop thinking about what you said, and I realized that I'm being a terrible, selfish person. Adrian ran his hands through his hair, disheveling it. I'm so desperate to save my company that I haven't stopped to consider what I'm asking of you. Victoria remained silent, intrigued by the change in his tone. You're right. I'm asking you to abandon who you are, to lie to your family, to live a fake life, and all because of my problems. He approached her, his blue eyes filled with genuine regret. If you want to cancel everything, I understand. I'll find another solution. It was exactly what Victoria had come to say, but hearing his words, she felt something unexpected stir in her chest. For the first time, Adrian was putting her feelings above his needs. She began, but was interrupted by the sudden entrance of an elegant woman into the office. Adrian, darling, we need to talk urgently, said the woman, stopping abruptly. Upon seeing Victoria, she was a lady in her early 60s with impeccably styled grey hair, wearing a suit that screamed haute couture. Victoria immediately recognized the aristocratic bearing of the Cross family. Grandmother Eleanor, said Adrian, visibly tense. This is Victoria, your secretary who's going to pretend to be your wife, I know, interrupted Eleanor Cross, with a frankness that left Victoria speechless. Don't look at me like that, dear. Do you think I would reach 80 years old without learning to investigate when something suspicious happens in my family? Victoria felt her blood run cold. They had been discovered. Grandmother, I can explain, Adrian began, but Eleanor raised her hand, silencing him. Sit down, both of you. We have a lot to talk about. Victoria obeyed automatically, her brain still processing the revelation. Adrian remained standing, clearly prepared to defend them both. First, said Eleanor, settling gracefully into the chair in front of them, I want you to know that I'm not here to sabotage your plans. In fact, I'm here to help. Help? Adrian repeated, confused. My dear grandson, did you really think I didn't know about your grandfather's ridiculous ultimatum? Eleanor laughed softly. Harold has always been dramatic. He's decided you need to get married to mature, as if marriage were a cure for irresponsibility. Victoria looked from Eleanor to Adrian, trying to understand the family dynamic that was unfolding. I vehemently disagreed with this decision, Eleanor continued. You are a brilliant CEO, Adrian. You've tripled the value of the company in 5 years. But Harold is obsessed with the idea that you need a wife to be taken seriously. So you know the marriage is fake? Asked Victoria, finding her voice finally. Eleanor turned to her with a warm smile. Dear, I investigated you as soon as I heard about the sudden engagement. Victoria Blackstone, 24 years old, father deceased, supports her cardiac mother and younger brother. Works 12 hours a day, never missed a single day, never asked for a raise. Graduated in business administration with a full scholarship, excellent grades. Victoria blushed, uncomfortable with the scrutiny. What impressed me most, Eleanor continued, was discovering that you donate part of your salary to an orphanage. In Queens for 2 years, even with your financial difficulties. Adrian turned to Victoria, surprised. You never told me this. It was none of your business, Victoria murmured. Exactly, said Eleanor, smiling more broadly. And that's why I completely approve of this arrangement. Approve? Adrian sat down, shocked. My dear, in the last 2 years I've watched you work with this young woman. I've seen how she anticipates your needs, how she manages crises, how she brings stability to your daily chaos. If anyone can make you seem mature and established, it's her. Victoria felt a strange mix of pride and embarrassment. But more importantly, Eleanor continued, her eyes gleaming with something that looked like mischief, I've seen how you've changed since you started planning this marriage. For the first time in years, you're considering someone else's feelings. You're questioning your priorities. You're becoming less selfish." Adrian opened his mouth to protest, but Eleanor continued, "And you, dear Victoria, are being forced to step out of your comfort zone to recognize your own worth. Last night at the Metropolitan Club, I heard you defended yourself magnificently when some of those vipers tried to intimidate you." "I didn't defend myself at all," Victoria protested. "I was paralyzed. You maintained dignity and natural elegance while they behaved like malicious schoolgirls. That, my dear, is a victory." Eleanor got up and walked to the window, observing the bustle of the city below. "Here's my proposal," she said, turning to them. "I'll help you convince Harold that this marriage is real. More than that, I'll guarantee that New York society accepts Victoria as a cross." "How?" asked Adrian. "By hosting a coming-out tea at my house. When Eleanor Cross endorses someone, no one dares to question it." She smiled at Victoria. "And I'll tell a little white lie, that I introduced you to myself, that I always knew you would be perfect for each other." Victoria felt dizzy. "Why would you do this for me? You barely know me." Eleanor approached and took her hands with surprising gentleness. "Because, dear, in 60 years of observing this family, you're the first person I've seen make my grandson think about someone other than himself. And because I recognize a kind soul when I see one." She turned to Adrian. "And you, my dear grandson, stop treating this young woman like an employee hired for a role. If you want this marriage to seem real, start behaving as if it were real." "What does that mean?" asked Adrian, although Victoria suspected he knew exactly what his grandmother was suggesting. "It means courting her properly. It means treating her like a woman you've chosen to love, not as a solution to your problems." Eleanor picked up her purse, preparing to leave. "It means that maybe you'll discover that this arrangement isn't as fake as you think." With those words, she left the office, leaving Adrian and Victoria in a silence charged with possibilities that neither of them dared to admit. "She's right," said Adrian finally. "I've been treating you like an employee, not like my fiancée." Victoria looked at him, seeing something new in his eyes, something that made her question if what she felt for him was really just professional gratitude. "Do we start over?" he asked, extending his hand. "For real this time?" Victoria looked at his outstretched hand, then at the man who was slowly becoming more than just her boss. Maybe Eleanor was right. Maybe there was something real blossoming between them, hidden beneath the formalities of the contract. "We start over," she said, taking his hand. Eleanor Cross's tea party was a resounding success. Victoria found herself surrounded by ladies who only a week before had treated her with disdain, now competing to demonstrate friendship and interest. The blessing of the family matriarch had transformed Victoria from intruder to protégé, and the change was as drastic as it was surreal. But it was during the second week after Eleanor's intervention that everything fell apart in a devastating way. Victoria was organizing the final preparations for the wedding, scheduled for the following Friday, when she received a call that changed everything. It was from New York Presbyterian Hospital. Mrs. Helena had fainted at home and had been rushed to the emergency room. "Miss Blackstone, you need to come immediately," said the grave voice of the doctor on the other end of the line. "Your mother has suffered a severe cardiac episode. We need to talk about the next steps in her treatment." Victoria ran out of the office without explanations, leaving Adrian in the middle of an important meeting. Throughout the taxi ride to the hospital, her hands trembled uncontrollably. The doctor's words echoed in her mind: "Severe cardiac episode." She found Eduardo in the waiting room, his eyes red with worry. He stood up when he saw her arrive and hugged her tightly. "You're tidying up the room for the move to the Hamptons," he said, his voice choked. She was so excited about the wedding, talking non-stop about how you deserve to be happy. Suddenly, she screamed and fell. Victoria felt the world spin around her. Her mother was ill because of the agitation of the fake wedding. Dr. Levine, the cardiologist, was direct when they were finally able to talk. Your mother needs complex heart surgery, and she needs it urgently. The procedure is expensive and risky, but without it, she has at most a few months. How much does it cost? Asked Victoria, although she already knew that the answer would be beyond her possibilities. $200,000, excluding the costs of hospitalization and post-operative medications. And there's a waiting list at the public hospital that could take years. Victoria sat heavily in the doctor's office chair. Even with the money she would receive from the wedding, she still didn't have immediate access to that amount. The first payment would only arrive after the ceremony. "Doctor," she said, trying to keep her voice steady, "how much time do we have?" 2 weeks at most. After that, the risk becomes unacceptable." 2 weeks. Exactly the time it would take to receive the first payment from Adrian. Victoria left the hospital in shock. Eduardo walked beside her in silence, both lost in their worries. When they arrived at the apartment on the Upper East Side, she locked herself in her room and cried for the first time since accepting Adrian's proposal. The phone rang insistently. Adrian had called dozens of times since she had run out of the office. Finally, she answered. "Victoria, what happened? You disappeared in the middle of the meeting with the Petersons. My mother is hospitalized. She needs urgent surgery." Silence on the other end of the line. "I'm coming to the hospital now." "No," Victoria said quickly. "You don't need to. She's stable for now." "Victoria, let me help." "You're already helping. After the wedding, I'll have money to pay for the surgery." But even as she said the words, Victoria knew it was too late. The surgery couldn't wait. The next morning, Victoria returned to the hospital determined to find a solution. She tried to negotiate with the administrator, applied for loans at 3 different banks, even considered selling the apartment on the Upper East Side that Adrian had rented. Nothing worked. It was when she was leaving the last bank, after another rejection, that she received an unexpected call. The number wasn't familiar. Victoria Blackstone. The voice was male, confident, with a tone that immediately put her on alert. "Yes? My name is James Cross, Adrian's cousin. I'd like to talk to you." Victoria felt a shiver run down her spine. She had heard Adrian mention James a few times, always with disdain and distrust. "About what?" "About how much you really want to save your mother." The coldness of the statement left Victoria speechless. "Meet me at the cafe in the Plaza Hotel in an hour. I have a proposal that could solve all your problems." Victoria should have refused. She should have hung up the phone and told Adrian everything, but the image of Mrs. Helena in the hospital bed, connected to heart monitors, clouded her judgment. James Cross was an older, crueler version of Adrian. He had the same blue eyes as the family, but they shone with a calculating coldness that made Victoria immediately regret coming. "You're prettier than I expected," he said, examining her without ceremony. "I understand why my cousin took an interest in you." "What do you want?" asked Victoria, getting straight to the point. James smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I want you to call off the wedding." "Why?" "Because I know it's fake. I know about the contract, about the $5 million, about the whole charade." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial tone. "And I know that your mother needs $200,000 for a surgery that can't wait." Victoria felt nauseous. "How do you know that?" "I have my resources. The question is, what are you willing to do to save your mother?" James slid an envelope across the table, $250,000, enough for the surgery and additional costs. All you have to do is disappear before the ceremony on Friday. Victoria looked at the envelope as if it were a venomous snake. In exchange for what? For the family company. When Adrian fails to get married in time, control passes to me, as it should have from the beginning. You want me to betray Adrian. I want you to choose between him and your mother. James leaned back in his chair, clearly satisfied with himself. It's a simple choice, Victoria. Your mother dies, or you take the money and save her. Adrian will find another solution to his problems. He always does. Victoria felt tears burn her eyes. And if I tell him about this conversation, you can try, but your mother doesn't have 2 weeks to wait while he arranges the money. And we both know he doesn't have immediate access to that amount without going through the company's bureaucratic procedures. James was right. The money from the marriage contract was conditional on the actual wedding and subsequent legal procedures. Think it over, said James, getting up to leave. You have until Thursday to decide. After that, the offer expires. He left the envelope on the table and left, leaving Victoria alone with the most impossible choice of her life. That night, she sat beside Mrs. Helena's bed in the hospital, holding her mother's cold hand while the monitors beeped monotonously. Eduardo slept in the chair next to her, exhausted with worry. "My dear daughter," murmured Mrs. Helena, opening her eyes. "With difficulty, you don't have to call off the wedding because of me." Victoria choked back a sob. "Mom! I overheard your conversation with the doctor. I know we don't have money for the surgery." Mrs. Helena squeezed her daughter's hand weakly. "But I don't want you to sacrifice your happiness for me." "You are my happiness," whispered Victoria, tears finally falling. "You and Eduardo are all I have. And Adrian, don't you love him?" The question cut Victoria like a knife. Love? At some point during the past few weeks, her feelings for Adrian had evolved. Beyond gratitude and professional interest, she had begun to see in him the vulnerable man behind the CEO facade, and that scared her. She began, but couldn't finish the sentence. Because the painful truth was that, yes, she had fallen in love with Adrian Cross, and now she had to choose between saving him from financial ruin or saving her own mother's life. Victoria spent Wednesday night sleepless, looking alternately at James's envelope and at the phone where Adrian's worried messages accumulated. Her mother's surgery had been scheduled for Friday morning, the same day as the wedding. The cruel irony of the situation did not go unnoticed. She would literally have to choose between saving her mother's life or fulfilling the agreement that would save Adrian's company. On Thursday morning, Victoria arrived at the office with a crystal clear but dangerous resolution. She would not accept James's dirty money, nor would she abandon Adrian on the eve of the wedding. There was a third option, desperate and risky, but it was the only one that would allow her to look at herself in the mirror. "Adrian," she said, entering his office without knocking, "I need you to lend me $200,000 today." Adrian looked up from his documents, surprised by the urgency in her voice. "For your mother's surgery?" "Yes. I know it's a lot of money. I know it's not in our agreements, but—" "Victoria," Adrian interrupted her gently, "you don't need to borrow it. I'll pay for the surgery." "No." The firmness in her voice surprised him. "I don't want charity. I want a loan with interest, with a contract, with everything documented properly." Adrian got up, approaching her. "Why is it so important to do this officially?" Victoria took a deep breath. She had decided to tell the truth about James, but she needed to do it intelligently. "Because your cousin James contacted me yesterday." Adrian's face hardened instantly. "James, what did he want?" "He knows about our contract, about everything." Victoria watched the color drain from Adrian's face. "And he offered me $250,000 to call off the wedding." Adrian was silent for a long moment, processing the information. When he finally spoke, his voice was filled with a cold rage that Victoria had never seen. How much did he offer? 250,000, enough to save my mother and still have some left over. And you're here telling me this because... Victoria approached him, her eyes meeting his with intensity. Because I'm not the kind of person who betrays someone who trusts me. Because in the past few days, I've learned that some things are more important than money. And because... She hesitated, the words caught in her throat. Because what, Victoria? Because I've fallen in love with you, Adrian Cross. For real. And I won't let James destroy you using my family as a weapon. The silence that followed was charged with electricity. Adrian took a step towards her, his blue eyes burning with an intensity that made Victoria's heart race. Are you saying you want to turn our fake marriage into something real? I'm saying it's not fake for me anymore, Victoria replied, her voice barely a whisper. I don't know when it happened, but it happened. Adrian took her face in his hands, his thumbs caressing her cheeks tenderly. Victoria, The office phone rang shrilly, interrupting the moment. Adrian ignored it, but the phone continued to ring insistently. Answer it, said Victoria. It could be about the company. Adrian answered reluctantly. Victoria watched his expression gradually change from irritation to concern, then to pure panic. What happened? She asked when he hung up. James has called an emergency board meeting for this afternoon. He's going to try to prove that our marriage is a sham, to invalidate it before it happens. Victoria felt her blood run cold. How? I don't know. But he must have evidence, photos, documents, witnesses, something that proves we're faking it. Then we move up the wedding. Let's go to City Hall now. Have the civil ceremony immediately. Adrian shook his head. It's too late. James must have alerted every registry office in the city. And besides, my grandfather would never accept a marriage done in haste in the midst of a crisis. It would look exactly like what it is. Desperation. Victoria began to pace back and forth, her brain working furiously. There has to be a way. We can't let him win. Victoria, maybe it's time to accept defeat. You take his money, save your mother, and I'll find another solution for the company. No. The fierceness in her voice surprised him. I'm not going to let that man use the love I feel for my family to destroy the man I've fallen in love with. Adrian looked at her with growing admiration. So what do you propose? Victoria stopped pacing, a dangerous idea forming in her mind. We go to the board meeting together and we face James head-on. Victoria, he has evidence and we have the truth. Victoria approached him, her eyes shining with steely determination. Maybe our relationship started as a contract, but it's not anymore. And if James wants a fight, then we'll give him a fight. The board is going to ask difficult questions. They're going to investigate every aspect of our relationship. Then let them investigate. Let them see how you paid for my mother's surgery without thinking twice. Let them see how you defended me at the Metropolitan Club. Let them see how your grandmother supported us because she recognized that there was something real between us. Adrian took her hands, interlacing his fingers with hers. And if it doesn't work, what if James manages to prove that we started with a contract? Then at least we fought together. Victoria raised their interlaced hands and kissed his knuckles. Adrian, all my life, I've fought alone for everything. For the first time, I have someone by my side. I'm not giving up now. The phone rang again. This time, it was Adrian's secretary informing him that the board meeting had been scheduled for 4 in the afternoon. 2 hours, said Adrian after hanging up. We have 2 hours to prepare for the fight of our lives. Victoria nodded, but a sudden worry struck her. Adrian, what if James manages to delay the wedding long enough so that it's too late? What if my mother... "Your mother is going to be okay," said Adrian firmly. "Even if we have to reschedule the wedding, I guarantee she'll have the surgery. That's non-negotiable. But your deadline, my company isn't worth your mother's life, Victoria. It never was." In that moment, Victoria knew with absolute certainty that she had fallen in love with the right man. Not the billionaire CEO, not the powerful heir, but the man who put the life of a stranger above his own financial interests. "Then let's fight," she said, sealing the decision with a kiss that contained all the determination and love she felt for him. But as they prepared for the confrontation with James, neither of them imagined that Eleanor Cross had spent the entire morning making mysterious calls, gathering information that would completely transform the course of the board meeting. The war was just beginning, and all the pieces were finally moving towards the decisive confrontation that would determine not only the future of Cross Industries, but the destiny of the love that had grown unexpectedly between two hearts who believed they were only fulfilling a contract. The Cross Industries boardroom had never seemed so intimidating. Victoria and Adrian entered hand in hand, facing the curious and skeptical gazes of the 12 board members. Harold Cross, the family patriarch, presided over the table with a stern expression, while James smiled with predatory confidence from the other side of the room. "Gentlemen," James began, standing up theatrically, "I've called this meeting to expose a fraud that threatens the integrity of our company. My cousin Adrian's marriage is an elaborate charade to circumvent the conditions established for his succession." Victoria felt Adrian tense beside her, but kept her face serene. They had decided to let James expose himself first. "I have here," James continued, brandishing a thick folder, "photographic evidence of secret meetings between Adrian and Victoria, documents proving suspicious payments, and the testimony of employees who confirm that she's just his secretary, hired for this role." Harold Cross frowned. "What evidence is this?" James spread photographs across the table. They were images of Victoria and Adrian at the restaurant, where they had discussed the contract, at the apartment on the Upper East Side, at the mansion in the Hamptons. All seemed to prove a purely transactional relationship. "As you can see," James said triumphantly, "there's nothing romantic about these encounters. They're clearly business meetings." Adrian stood up, ready to defend himself, but Victoria stopped him with a gentle touch on his arm. It was her time to speak. "Mr. Cross," she addressed the patriarch, "may I respond to these accusations?" Harold nodded, intrigued by the young woman's calmness. "It's true that our relationship started in a unconventional way," said Victoria, her voice clear and steady. "Adrian made me a business proposal, and I accepted it because of my family's financial needs." "And," a murmur ran through the room. James smiled, thinking he had won. "But," Victoria continued, "what James doesn't understand is that contracts can be broken, but true feelings cannot be faked indefinitely." She turned to Adrian, her eyes shining. "With genuine love, I've fallen in love with the man who paid for my mother's heart surgery without hesitating, even knowing that it wasn't in our agreement. With the man who defended me when society tried to humiliate me. With the man who, when he found out that I could betray him for money, was more concerned about my moral dilemma than his financial losses." The room was in absolute silence. Harold Cross leaned forward, clearly interested. "And you, Adrian?" asked the patriarch. "Did you also break your own contract?" Adrian stood up, taking Victoria's hand. "Completely, grandfather. I've fallen in love with the woman who works 12 hours a day without complaining, who donates part of her salary to orphanages even while barely being able to support her family, who preferred to tell me about James's attempted bribery than accept easy money." "Lies!" exploded James. "They're making this up on the spot." It was then that Eleanor Cross entered the room majestically, carrying her own folder of documents. "I apologize for the delay," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "But I needed to verify some interesting information about my dear great-nephew James." James paled visibly. "Harold," Eleanor continued, "did you know that James has been trying to sabotage Adrian for months? That he hired private investigators to spy on Victoria? That he offered her a bribe to abandon Adrian?" Eleanor spread her own evidence on the table. Audio recordings of James's calls, bank records showing payments to private investigators, even a photo of him handing the envelope to Victoria at the cafe. "And even more interestingly," Eleanor continued, "I discovered that James has been embezzling funds from the company for 2 years, using shell corporations to hide the thefts." The explosion of indignant voices filled the room. Harold Cross stood up slowly, his face contorted with anger. "James Cross," he said in a thundering voice, "you are expelled from this company and this family, immediately." "Uncle Harold, I can explain." "Security," shouted Harold. "Escort my ex-nephew out of the building." As James was dragged out of the room protesting, Harold turned to Victoria and Adrian. "Now," he said, his expression softening, "about this marriage." Victoria held her breath. "Eleanor has told me the whole story. Your desperation, the contract, and how that agreement has turned into something real." Harold smiled for the first time. "Do you think I've reached 80 years old without recognizing true love when I see it?" Adrian seemed confused. "So, you knew?" "I suspected, but Eleanor confirmed everything today." Harold approached them, placing his hands on both of their shoulders. "Adrian, the company is yours. You've proven that you're able to put love above money, integrity above convenience." Victoria felt tears of relief streaming down her face. "And you, my dear," said Harold to Victoria, "welcome to the family officially." Victoria's phone rang at that moment. It was from the hospital, informing her that Mrs. Helena's surgery had been a complete success. 6 months later, Victoria and Adrian renewed their vows in a true ceremony at Eleanor's home in the Hamptons, with Mrs. Helena healthy and Eduardo about to enter the best university in the state. Victoria had become co-chair of Cross Industries, implementing social programs that transformed the company's culture. But the most special moment had happened the night before, when Adrian had asked her to marry him again, this time without contracts, without deadlines, only with pure and infinite love. "This time, it's forever," he had whispered, placing a diamond ring on her finger. "It was always meant to be forever," Victoria had replied, sealing with a kiss the promise that had begun as a lie and become the most beautiful truth of their lives. Dear listeners, we hope Victoria and Adrian's emotional journey has touched your hearts as much as it has touched ours. To continue experiencing love stories that overcome all adversity, we have prepared a special collection with equally captivating narratives about second chances and true love. Find these stories by clicking on your left. If Victoria's story moved you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give that special like to the video. Every day we bring you unique stories that explore the complexity of human feelings and prove that true love always finds a way. Don't miss our upcoming content and tell us in the comments, do you believe that contracts can turn into eternal love? We'll be waiting for you there.